For a few years in the 1970s, the Mr. Asia syndicate made millions.
Heroin creates its own market. It acts like a form of plague.
Until jealousy, betrayal, and murder brought it all crashing down.
Then he just pulled out a gun, shot her in the back of the head, and then said to Wayne, "You're going to help me bury her."
This is Mr. Asia, A Forgotten History. All episodes now available on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
I want to get straight into the show today, and just a warning, our first segment of the show today discusses serious themes, including suicide. Former All Whites goalkeeper Jake Gleeson, who played 8 times for the national side between 2011 and 2014, has been awarded $35.7 million New Zealand dollars in damages after he brought a medical malpractice lawsuit against an ex-team doctor at Portland Timbers Football Club. His career came to a halt in 2018 after surgery to treat a stress fracture in his leg went terribly wrong. Both legs became infected after a plate inserted into his leg hadn't been properly sterilised. This led to multiple surgeries, serious medical problems, and eventually the end of his professional career. Jake Gleeson is with us on News Talk ZB. Jake, thanks for joining us to tell us the story. Take us back to 2018, back to the start, and tell us how this all began.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's kind of funny to think back now. I just remember having some champagne for quite some time back then, and getting work done for some shin splints. Went in for an X-ray one day, and they told me that I had some stress fractures. I actually only had a stress fracture on one side, and then the beginning of the stress fracture on the other side. So it's a bit of a kerfuffle at this time. But went into surgery that next week with about a 2 to 3 month recovery time. Didn't think too much of it, thinking I was going to be out on the field in probably that 2 month time frame, back out training, playing, doing what I loved. Left the training field that day, not knowing that what was to come, and that would be the last day I would be training or be a professional footballer, really.
When did it become apparent after that initial surgery that something wasn't right?
Yeah, so it took a few weeks. The infection showed up about just over 2 weeks, I believe, from the initial surgery, and it showed up kind of just as a traditional infection would. I was put on some medication then for it to help subside it, which initially did work. At this point, I had no idea what had occurred in the first surgery. So, went in there, took all the antibiotics that they gave me, and at the end of the course of those oral antibiotics, the infection just kind of came back with a vengeance. And at that point, a second surgery was needed for them to flush out, what that infection would be. And this is on my right side. So the plate that got inserted that only went through, and we can get into it, the smaller sterilization process. This is only happening in my right leg. My left leg's perfectly fine at this time. So they do the washout, which has an 80% success rate if it's just a surface level infection, plus me being a young, healthy individual and being on the oral. And at that point, I had a PICC line in, so a tube that went into near an artery in my heart. So I was pumping in antibiotics through my leg. We had a very good chance, if it was a surface level infection, to kick it, and it probably would have set me back about maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So that was the first sign of the infection and the first surgery after the infection. They decided to not remove the plate and leave the plate in. They didn't inspect the underside of the plate or the screw holes, which where the infection was actually brewing, because it came from the initial surgery and the breach and sterilization protocol. And so at that point, I was just injecting every 6 hours, injecting fluid into this PICC line, and just hoping this infection would subside and go away.
But it didn't, and you had multiple surgeries after that, and it just kept on getting worse.
Yes, I'll kind of go through the story as I've been in the format that I can tell it best. Obviously, it actually just got worse with the infection. My wound didn't heal, and I had pretty gross stuff coming out of the wound on my right-hand side. At this point, my left leg was completely fine, no signs of infection, all was going well. But my right leg wasn't getting better with any of the antibiotics that I was on, and I was on some really, really strong antibiotics at the time. After about another 2 weeks, I'm not sure on the timeline, it's been a few years, they decided to remove the plate on my right leg. That was the side that barely had the stress fracture. I think at that point the stress fracture had healed, and so I'd gone from barely having a stress fracture to now having 6 massive holes in my right shin. So they went in there, pulled out the plate, and then did a washout, and then they closed up that wound. It was a few days later, I went in on a checkup for the plate removal on my right leg, where my left leg started to show signs of infection. And so essentially what had happened is and at this point I was pretty sick. So I was grey, I wasn't eating, felt like I was rotting from the inside. And I went in and they saw the left leg, saw that same redness, same warmth, same everything that was a sign of infection, and they pulled that plate out straight away. And essentially what had happened is, because I developed osteomyelitis in my right leg, essentially the infection had traveled through my blood and settled on the foreign hardware on my left leg. So if they had just removed the plate on that first surgery, or even checked the underside of it to know that that's where the infection was, at that point we could have avoided a lot more of the surgeries that I went through. On my 1 week follow-up, I went to see the same doctor, and this was the same doctor who was caring for me, who's the main doctor in this case, Dr. Edelson. Looked at my left leg and he said, "Yeah, your left leg's healing really, really well. Everything looks okay. It looks like, we caught it, and there's no future infection." I told him I felt like I was rotting from the inside, and then during that appointment, I said, "My right leg isn't healing, and there's actually pus still coming out of it, and the wound, and this is 2 weeks post-surgery from that right plate being removed." I was like, my left leg I'm not concerned about. It does look pretty good because you got in there and cleaned it out quickly. The right leg was just oozing pus. And he looked at me and said, "It's just bad blood flow. The wound will heal and you're fine." At that point, I just lost all confidence. I probably should have a little bit earlier, and called another team doctor, called him and said, "I need you to look at my leg. I think something's wrong, and I feel like I'm rotting from the inside." I went in to see that other doctor the next day, and then was rushed in to have 3 emergency surgeries in 5 days to clear what had become osteomyelitis, a dead bone. And so they had to go in and chunk out big parts of my bone. There was dead tissue in there. It was a bad scene. Once you develop osteomyelitis, it's about as bad as it can get as far as an infection goes. My body's going septic. I've got 104 Fahrenheit degree temperature, and I'm cuddling a bag of ice on my couch, which, with all this medicine still coursing through me every week. So it was after the first surgery of the new doctor when I found out about what had occurred in the first surgery.
Right. So it wasn't until then that you learned of the unsterilised plate being put in you in the very first surgery?
Yeah. The doctor had essentially broken national, state, and his own practice's sterilisation guidelines. It's about a 6-hour process that you have to go through to sterilise, in an implantable device which stays in the body. And he put this through about a 20-minute cycle and then pulled it out early. He didn't even run the full flash cycle, which is only meant for instruments because they don't remain in the human body. At this point, it's I want to say it's October of 2018, and I've lost a bunch of weight, got really, really sick, still on the PICC line. And I've gone from having the start of 2 stress fractures to 6 massive holes in my shin and osteomyelitis in my right leg. So yeah, it happened really, really, really quickly. And there's a few gory details in there that I'll leave out for this interview. But yeah, it was painful to say the least.
So Jake, at that point, are you still hopeful of a return to play?
Yeah, so we kind of threw a Hail Mary, which is a football term. I don't know if the New Zealand audience are familiar with it. It's like when a quarterback just throws the ball into the end zone and just hopes that his team catches it. So in February of the next year, after my bone had after things had settled down, I was off antibiotics. We decided to try and rod my legs, which means you put two, I think the titanium rods through the middle of your tibia to make it stabilized. And at that point, if that had worked, that means that those 6 holes in my leg didn't really matter, because the titanium rod would kind of keep them stable. I don't know the exact date, but we did both legs on the same day. So I've got two rods put on my legs on the same day. So needless to say, I wasn't moving too much. Same kind of thing happened on the right leg. Because of the amount of damage and osteomyelitis, reinfections can occur. And because of how deteriorated that bone in that area was, that right rod became infected. And it kind of followed the same path line. At this point, the new doctor was like, if this rod comes out, your career's over. And I knew that. So I went in for more surgeries, was placed on another PICC line. So I was injecting more things into me to try my best to get my career back. Because once that thing came out, those holes take years to fill in. So I'm not passing a medical in Island Bay in Wellington wouldn't have picked me up, mate, with holes in my leg like that. So eventually I was in the hospital, was really sick. PICC line wasn't working. PICC line got infected as well because it had been on me for so long. I had a wound that hadn't closed in 3 weeks and was oozing pus. An infectious disease doctor walked in the room in the hospital, looked at me, looked at how grey I was and how much weight I'd lost, and basically said, that rod has to come out and has to come out today. And that was it. That was the end of any chance of playing football again.
So during this time, how much pain were you in? How much pain are you still in?
Yeah, so going through the surgeries, it ebbed and flowed, like, because you would have one and then you'd get back where you could start walking around a little bit, and then you'd have to go in and get another one and another one. So it was this constant battle of getting yourself through it. I would say I would like to think that I have a pretty high pain tolerance as a human being. This was, unbelievably painful. I think the physical pain, obviously, people could probably understand. I had this thing called a wound vac put in my leg, which is like a tube that goes in and sucks any infection out of your bone. And so it would click. And when it clicked, I knew it was about to start. And for about 15, 20 seconds, it would suck. And it was just like agony. I would start shaking and I would have to hold on to things. So that was on my leg for a little while. But yeah, you're just getting cut open and butchered for months on end. The physical pain was brutal, but I'm pretty good at handling physical pain. I would say there's constant pain. Like I don't know what it is to not have some form of throbbing or pain in my legs. It will only get worse the older I get. I'll have to go see some nerve specialists. The way that I explain life right now, it's like a cost analysis. If I want to go for a long hike, I can do it, but it's just like, is it worth the pain? Whereas before, I could do it with no issues, no worries. I tried snowboarding after all this. Once my bones had healed up, this was a couple of years ago, and got the gear and haven't been back since, because the cost analysis didn't work. It was just too painful, hobbling around the next day. So that's kind of where my life is right now. It's shooting nerve pain on occasions. That gets worse with more activity. Running is something I can do, but like I said, it gets worse and worse the more I do it. So you just have to kind of transition your life and your health and what you used to do to new normals that really take the load off of what's going to really impact you and hurt you. So it's just a cost analysis is what I call it. And it's not fun, especially from going from a professional athlete to thinking about how much is it going to hurt going on a 5-kilometer walk.
And I mean, that's the physical side of this. What about mentally, Jake? How much of a toll has this taken on you mentally? Can you articulate that?
Yeah, and I'll do my best not to break down for you, mate. I've put it in a box inside me for a very long time. So the trial, I kind of let it all out. I was able to tell my story. I think there were points where I just didn't want to live anymore. Simple as that. The best way to explain it is I felt the world would be a better place if I wasn't in it. I was just a burden on my friends, a burden on my now fiance, who's the most wonderful person in the world for putting up with me. And we had just started dating actually when all this happened, and she was, picking up my scripts, helping me eat when I can, making me eat when I couldn't. She was there through it all. So there was a long time where it was, very, very, very dark times. I'll open up quite open here. And the worst that got was I basically had a pill jar because I'd been prescribed so many, opioids like painkillers and anti-anxiety and all these things. So I filled this pill jar up with enough pills that I know that if I took it all at once, it would kill me. And I drove out a few times to different places, or one place, a couple of places around Portland with that. And I had that around me for a few months. And there was definitely some close calls where I thought that was going to be the day, but never did it, never went through with it, which I'm happy about. But I'm also, you battle with the internal side of it, of letting yourself get that bad. So it's an interesting space to fall in, but it was a very dark time, and it's something I wouldn't wish on anyone. And there were a lot of factors that kind of led to that for me to get to that point. And the last few years, I would just say it's been a slow climb out of a very, very deep dark hole.
Our guest is former All Whites goalkeeper Jake Gleeson, awarded $35.7 million New Zealand dollars in damages after he brought a medical malpractice lawsuit against an ex-team doctor at Portland Timbers Football Club. So you've told us about what happened, Jake. How did you then decide upon the path of legal action?
Yeah, once I found out what had occurred in the first surgery, for me, what he had done in the corners that he had cut, as you know, New Zealand's not, you can't do this in New Zealand. I didn't even know what my rights were, even though I'd been living in the States for a long time. There were people around me who knew a little bit more about it, and they said, my agent actually at the time was like, you should just go speak to a lawyer. Went and spoke to the lawyer who ended up representing me, and I told him the story, and it was a pretty crazy one, and it gets him pretty deep, and left there. And I think my uncle came over and visited, and he met with him. He's an attorney as well. And they asked him, is he telling the truth? Because if this is true, like, this is big. And this seems like a bit of a crazy story that a doctor would do this. And my uncle responded, he may not be the smartest boy, but sure, he sure is an honest one. So, at that point, I think once I found out the plate had basically just been, the way that I can explain it, it's like putting a piece of raw chicken in a microwave for a minute and then feeding it to someone while they're asleep. It's essentially what he did. There was no turning back once I found that out, that I had to kind of move forward to bring light of it, and then also to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Like, the story has got a lot bigger than I thought it might have, but I think hopefully that it puts in perspective that, if you're a surgeon, you don't have the autonomy to just do what you want. Your actions impact your patients. What he took from me, he can never give back. And I even said it to my lawyer. I was like, if they don't want to, offer any money, or if we win money, I would happily exchange it for a time machine. But unfortunately, that's not a possibility.
How has this changed your relationship with the Portland Timbers Football Club and with the club's fans?
I felt, the football club, I would say, swept me under the rug. I think if you pay attention to the upper management, or the stories of who is or was at the club at the time, you would know the kind of people that were managing it. Those stories you can go and Google yourself. I won't bring those up. So they, just swept under the rug, thrown out like trash. And so that was really, really hard to deal with, because I'd moved there when I was 19, and I considered these people, an extension of my family. To play at a club for 9 years is not normal in the world of football. So, definitely felt not good about that. I ended up moving to San Francisco at the beginning of 2020 after all the surgeries and recovering, and getting that separation, I think, really, really helped me. But I'm back in Portland now because my fiance got a job here. Doesn't feel the way that it used to, but I'm going to actually attend my first Timbers game in April, and it will be the second game I've gone to since all this. Not the Timbers game, but any football game with the Timbers Army. So although I felt like I was thrown out by the club, the response from the community from all this has been really positive. So I have to appreciate them for that.
Yeah, that's great. Jake, there's no getting away from the fact that, the settlement is big, 20 million US, 34.5 million New Zealand dollars. I know you'd prefer the time machine, obviously, but what does this settlement mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a long way to go in that regard. There's appeals, there's all these things in legal jargon that I know nothing about. So we still don't know what will happen over the next 6 months to a year. This is the first step in, once again, a very long path. I don't think it's sunk in yet. I'm very tired still. Trial is a very grueling process, and I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. The more cathartic side of it all is being able to tell my story. The money is an added bonus once we figure out what it all looks like, because I'm not currently sitting with a $20 million US check. If anybody's asking, it doesn't work like that. So, once that all settles and that is confirmed, we've already started conversations with some local groups around here to highlight this, and I really want to kind of utilize it also to bring attention to mental health as well, especially for athletes. I think it is growing, and I think there is support there, but it's tough to lose something that you identify with so much, whether it's taken from you or you have to walk away from it. So I'd like to do something in that realm. And then I would like to go somewhere nice with my fiance and throw my phone in a lockbox somewhere and just kind of take a week to take some deep breaths and kind of start to put this all behind us as we move forward with our life.
Last question. Have you fallen out of love with football?
It's a great question. No, because if I could play one more professional game and walk out, whether that be with all white game, Timbers game, I would give a lot to do that. Basically anything. And the reason I know I haven't is that there are still mornings I wake up and I forget everything that's happened, and I actually get up thinking I'm about to go into training. It's a game that gave me a lot of opportunity. I owe the game a lot. There was a period after all this where I had to walk away from it, and I did, and I looked at it as a source of anger or anxiety or stress. But I think slowly over time, I can't deny the fact that I love football, and that's been in me since I was a kid. So I'm excited to watch more. I haven't really watched much, and to slowly get back into it, and hopefully it hurts a little bit less and less over time that I can no longer do it. And I think what I'm most excited for is to see the boys in 2026 cause some upsets in the States. I couldn't be more excited for the All Whites and the boys on the team that I know, and all the young guns coming through. I mean, they're an impressive bunch, so I'll be there supporting them for sure.
Yeah, as will we all. Jake, I can't thank you enough for being so open and honest about what you've been through. I wish more than anything that you didn't have to go through this and I could find you that time machine. But now that you have, and you're out the other side and the US justice system has done its job, I wish you only peace and fulfillment in the years ahead. Thank you so much again for joining us in such an authentic way.
No, I appreciate you reaching out, and it's a story that I think needs to be heard. And I'll say it again, if anybody needs any help or is going through anything, reach out to me. Hopefully I'll have something a little bit more established as we move forward. But yeah, like I said, it's a story I needed to tell to make sure that it didn't happen to anyone else. So appreciate your time, mate. Appreciate you reaching out, and you'll see what the future holds. But I think it's a little brighter than the last 7 years, which is hopeful.
No doubt. Thanks, Jake. Jake Gleeson there, former All Whites and Portland Timbers goalkeeper with quite the tale, quite the story.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.